All right. Well, happy GIS Day. Happy to be with all of you today. And we are going to, of course, talk about ArcGIS Insights. We'll start out with explaining, well, what is ArcGIS Insights? And we'll look at an example to get more familiar with what Insights can do. And we'll cover some fundamental concepts by exploring a workbook and some data sources for insights. So you have that kind of understanding, what goes into insights, what can we work with. And then Melissa is going to take us through how we can visualize some data with charts and some analysis and sharing. And at the end, we'll open it up for questions. We also have some resources that we can provide for all of you as well. If you want to continue learning insights and kind of play around with it, we have some resources for you. All right. So what is ArcGIS Insights? Well, it's often referred to as a data analytics workbench that allows us to perform interactive and exploratory analysis. And it's designed for all analysts, so you don't even have to be a GIS analyst to use Insights. It allows us to bring together our spatial data, our non-spatial data, all in one product where we can then map it out. We can add it to different types of charts. We can filter the data. And it's all done through this drag and drop interaction. And we'll see that as we go through the demos. Probably one of my favorite things in Insights is this drag and drop kind of thing, how you interact with the data in your page. So we'll see that as we go through. So thought we could start out with an example of a shared page in Insights. So to get you familiar with what Insights looks like, how we can use this page to answer some questions about the data that we're looking at. So I'm going to switch over to this shared page. So let me do that. And we'll go to a different screen here. Okay, so we're looking at a shared page from Insights, and it's kind of a different topic, but it's Roger Federer Grand Slam final statistics. So if you're into tennis, this is right up your alley, but if not, that's okay. It's a great example of an Insights page that's been shared because it has all these different charts that we can interact with. It has a couple of map cards as well. You scroll down, there's a lot within this page that's presented to us. There's even a table. So a lot of information, even though it's about tennis, but we can interact with it here. Even at the top of this page, it has some questions that we can ask and answer with what's presented in this page. So I thought we can do a couple of questions here and see what we find, see how we can interact with this page as we go. So we're going to take a look at one of these questions, and it's going to be, let's see here, on which surface Roger Federer is most successful to win titles. So we want to find that answer, and we happen to have a titles by surface card showing up here on the page. So we can even look at that and say, okay, obviously the hard surface is where he wins the most titles. Maybe that makes sense as opposed to grass or clay. But one thing we can do is we can hover over any one of these in this bar chart. We can hover over it and we can even get some information and a little bit of a pop-up. So we can see there's 11 different tournaments or titles that he's won on a hard surface. We might also think, well, I'm kind of curious, well, what tournaments were those? So we can actually click on this bar here. So if I click on it, you're going to notice that this titles by tournament card updated. And now we have an answer. Okay, well, looks like the Australia Open and the US Open is where he won these titles on a hard surface. So one thing with Insights is that if you're using the same data set between cards, it will actually update as you select in one card, it will update in another card. So it allows you to really interact in detail with the data that you have in your page. And this is a shared page, so we all get to interact with it, but when you're creating pages in your own workbook, you do the same type of thing. So it's very interactive, allows you to explore this data. So all we need to do is click on this hard surface once again, and it kind of resets everything back to what it was. All right, so that's one example. Let's look at another one. We have a question here. Let's see, what was the score of all Wimbledon titles that Roger Federer has won? So that's talking about a Wimbledon title. So we know that we have this titles by tournament card. There's one for Wimbledon. So let's select Wimbledon. And all the cards using that data update. So it looks like grass was the surface there. If we scroll down, some of these other charts have also updated to reflect that. But at the bottom, we have a table with score statistics. So then it's going to tell us the event is Wimbledon. We can see the runner-up. We can also see the scores as well. So it filters that information, so then we can see that in this table card and get an answer. All right, let's scroll back up here and we'll interact with, let's click on that once again. And I want to point out on this shared page that not only do we have these different charts and maps in a table that we just looked at, we also have these different filters that are on this page. So that's something you can add to your an insights page that you're sharing if you want to offer your audience some ways to filter the data they're looking at. So we may be curious, in our last question that we're going to ask here, we might want to look at our runner-up filters here and find out which tournaments that Andy Roddick has been runner-up to Federer. So then all we need to do is we can uncheck our select all and just select Andy Roddick, and we get our answer. We can say, okay, looks like the US Open and Wimbledon is where he was runner-up to Federer. So it's kind of fun, a fun example here, but illustrates how you can interact with a shared page. We're certainly going to get into Insights itself and show you how we can add data and interact with it, but thought this was kind of a fun example to share with all of you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the chat. I'm going to put a link. I can send this, yeah, I can send this to everyone. I'm just going to put this down in the chat. If you all want to look at that, you can. Also want to share with you that we have a Insights gallery, and it has some examples from the community. So you can come in here and even take a look at other examples of shared Insights pages. So let me grab that link. Seems like it's a really long one for whatever reason, but there's a link to the gallery as well if you want to take a look at some other examples. All right. Well, that gets us into maybe understanding a little bit more of what Insights looks like and how we can interact with some data. Let's go ahead and cover some of the fundamentals that go into Insights, and then we'll jump back into how we go about creating an Insights workbook. So let me go ahead and share back in my slides. There we go. All right. Talk about some components. So some terminology that you'll hear when you're working in Insights. So these are the components of an Insights workbook. So when we're working with Insights, we are working with a workbook. And that's where we can organize our data and our analysis activity for a project all in a single location. And workbooks are made up of pages. And we can have multiple pages in a workbook. So within a page, we can work with data, cards, and tables. So when we add data to our page, it can be used in various chart cards, like a bar chart, like what we saw on the Federer page, tree maps, link charts, histograms, donut charts. That's just a few of the chart cards that we have in Insights, but you can view your data there. Or if your data has a spatial component, then you can add it to a map card. So then you can visualize your data spatially. And there's options for tables, one of them being a summary table where you can calculate counts or statistics. But if you're not worried about summary statistics, you can view your data in a reference table. So these are some of the components. We've got pages that we work on with data and all these different cards. And one of the things that Insights does for us is it will create a model of our process, our analysis, what we've done on that page. It keeps track of all those steps in the workflow. It does it behind the scenes, so we don't even have to build that ourselves. It does that for us. And it also allows us to take that model and share it. We can share it with others so then they can replicate that same workflow and plug in their own data. So that is a great use of Insights as well, is because you may have an analysis workflow you've come up with. Maybe a colleague wants to use that same workflow. You can share it as a model, and all they have to do is plug in their own data, and all of the cards update to reflect that analysis with their data. So really kind of cool. All right, so these are the components, and if you once you get into Insights, you'll start hearing some of this terminology even when we're in the demos here in a moment. Now you might be wondering, well, what kind of data can we use in Insights? We can work with files and feature layers. So files might be what we have stored locally. So it can be a file geodatabase. It can be non-spatial tables like Excel or CSV files, or shape files. And with something to keep in mind as far as our geodatabases and shape files is that they must be zipped up before bringing them into Insights. So we can work with those. We can also work with JSON or GeoJSON files. You can also access files that come from OneDrive or SharePoint. So if that's where you want to grab some of the files you want to work with, you can make a connection to either one of those in Insights. And of course, we can work with feature layers as data sources as well. So that's going to be our web-based data sets like our points, lines, and polygons that are stored in a portal like ArcGIS Online rather than a geodatabase. So if we have some data, some feature layers in our portal that we want to use, or that we know are out in ArcGIS Online, or if we want to grab them from the Living Atlas of the world, which has a lot of feature layers from all over the world, we can directly access those within Insights to search for and add data from those locations. It's really quite nice. So these are going to be those data sources, and we're going to see that coming up here as we get into a demo, how we go about creating a workbook and adding some data. So getting you familiar with some of these things before we get into that demo. All right, and then field types. So when we have added a data set into Insights, each field in that data set is automatically assigned a field type and an icon. based on the type of data it represents. So the field type, it will determine the type of visualization that we can utilize in insights. And we'll see that here coming up. But if we're working with some spatial data, the field type is location. You'll get this little icon that shows up. If we're working with maybe some qualitative or categorical type of data, the field type is going to be string. Or if your data happens to have some subtypes or coded value domains, it will treat those as being qualitative data. It gets its own unique icons for those as well. And then with quantitative or numeric data, the field type is going to be a number or a rate ratio, depending on what your field is displaying. And then temporal data. So if you have a date time field, then that will be considered the field type, and it will give this little clock icon. So you'll see these little icons appear in Insights as you're working with the data. And it's a way for Insights to kind of communicate with you as far as what those field types are. And you're going to be interacting with those different fields through this drag and drop process into Insights. All right, so it'll kind of let you know what that field represents, so you know ahead of time when you're working with it in Insights. All right, so let's go ahead and explore a workbook and some data. See what this is all about. So let me go ahead and switch over to my other screen. And we'll take a look together. Great. So we are looking at ArcGIS Insights. I've already logged in, and we can see where it tells us on our screen here. It says, create your first workbook. But want to also mention some things down on the left-hand side. And as you start working in Insights, you'll be working with some of these different tabs over here. As you create workbooks, they'll show up in this workbook tab. Any models you've shared will show up there, or if they've been shared within your organization. There's data. So data sets, this would be a place where you can upload your, if you have your file geodatabase zipped up, you can load that here. You can make connections to your OneDrive or SharePoint. And then presentation goes to when we share from Insights. So we looked at that shared Federer page a moment ago. That's a shared page. So you can share a page from your workbook and it will show up here. And there's also themes. So that's something that can be shared from Insights as well. Maybe if you've created on your page, maybe you've given it some colors, some icons, or some graphics, some text. That can all be a theme that you can then apply to other pages in a workbook. All right, we're going to focus on creating a workbook here. So let's do that. So it'll jump in here, it'll create this workbook, and right away we will be prompted to add some data to this page. And you'll recognize some of which we've talked about back in the slides, where we can access some data from the Living Atlas or just ArcGIS Online, anything that's been shared publicly. We can upload some of our files, our CSV Excel file. We'll do that here in a moment. And then it lists out connections. So I am logged into our ESRI Training Services organization, which means I can then access any data that's been shared within that organization. I'm connected to that portal. So then I can access feature layers from that portal to use in my page here in my workbook. And then as mentioned, if you made a connection to SharePoint or OneDrive, you can grab some data from those locations if needed. All right. We're going to come up to the search, and we are going to search for, let's do states. For state, we're going to add a feature layer for state boundaries. So I found that feature layer. Let's click on it. And then we can go ahead and click on add. And this will add it into our workbook, adds it to a page within our workbook. So as you can see, once this data comes in, it's a feature layer from my organization, state boundaries. Insights is going to automatically put it into a map card. So it detects that it's a feature layer. It has spatial data, and it's going to put it into a map card for us. And you can see how it added this layer over in our data pane on the left-hand side. So this is where we can expand our data, and we can see all the different fields we have access to use in Insights. And they all have those little icons like what we talked about for field types. So we have a location field type, we have string, and we have numeric. So not too many here, but this gets us familiar with how it looks in Insights. So just know that those little icons will tell you what that field type is. All right. And a couple of things that we'll do, starting out here, kind of some housekeeping items, I guess, is really, let's give our workbook a title. So in the upper left, we'll give it a title, and maybe we'll say this is some storm analysis. And we also can give a name to our page. So our workbook is storm analysis, and we can have multiple pages within this workbook. So it says page 1, but we can click on it to rename it. So let's do that. And we'll do Pennsylvania. Maybe I want to take a look at some storm data specifically for Pennsylvania, and maybe do some analysis or exploratory analysis with some of that data here on this page. And our card itself, so it says card 1. Well, let's click on it and make it more descriptive. We'll say storm locations. Okay. All right, so we've got a feature layer added to this page, and now we want to add some storm locations for Pennsylvania, and that is going to be stored in a CSV file. So we're going to go into the upper left corner here for this add to page, and we'll hit the plus. This time we're going to go to upload file. And it's going to tell us what types of files we can add. And some of what we talked about, CSV, Excel, shapefile, GeoJSON, and all, well, the shapefile, GeoJSON have to be zipped up. Here we're going to add a CSV. So let's browse for that. Here we go. There's our CSV for storm events from 2017. We'll go ahead and open that up. And then we'll go ahead and add it. So it adds it pretty quickly. Let's shrink that up. But you can see here's the storm events. And it didn't add it to the map card. It just added it to the data pane. So it is considered a non-spatial table. It's a CSV file, just like an Excel file would be treated that way here in Insights. But we can take a look at what comes along with this data. So let's expand it and see that we have all sorts of fields available to us that we can work with. And we recognize some of those icons that we talked about earlier. We have numeric, we have string. That looks like that's all we have there. But interestingly enough, there is this begin date time, end date time. So that is going to be some sort of date time field. And Insights is thinking it might be a string. It's going to kind of interpret based on what you've got in your CSV or your Excel table. If you have it set a certain way, Insights is going to read it that way. But if you know that that's really not what that field type is supposed to be, you can change it. So for our date time, all we need to do is click on this little string icon and we can change it to date time. So let's just do that. So it changes it. And we're not changing anything, permanent to the data. It's just here in Insights. We're working with it here. But we happen to know this is really a date time field and we want to use it that way here in Insights. We can do that with the end date time as well. And what you'll notice that Insights has done here is that it has created these subfields from your date time field. So whatever is in your date time field, Insights looks at it and then it creates subfields for whatever is there. So looks like we have year, quarter, month, day of week. What's really nice about that is that you can use these different subfields as their own field in Insights. So it kind of splits it out and gives you more options when you're working with your date time field. All right, we'll see that here in a moment, but like to point that out. All right. Now, we know this is a non-spatial table. What can we do in order to visualize this data in our map card? So let's look here. If we scroll all the way down in this data set, we have latitude and longitude all the way at the bottom. So we can actually use that and tell Insights to take that information and enable location on this data set. So oftentimes users of Insights will be using tables from Excel or CSV. And you can use all sorts of analysis tools and charts and tables here in Insights to work with that non-spatial data sets. But there might be times where you might want to visualize that in a map card. So if you have some location information available to you, you can enable location. So that's what we're going to do here. So we have this data set options. And I'm going to click on that and go to enable location. So then it pops open this little window and it says, okay, well, how do you want to enable location? And the first tab is with coordinates. And we know we have that latitude and longitude fields. So we can use those, and Insights has even found it for us. But I do want to point out there's other options here too, because you may be working with an address table. Maybe you don't have X and Y coordinates. Maybe you just have a bunch of addresses. So you can enable location that way. It just does some geocoding for you. There's also the options for geography or standard boundaries. And both of these will actually take your data set and do a kind of a join with another data set you might have within your Insights page, like a boundary file, like probably even my state boundaries. I could do that and enable location through the geography itself. So there's some couple of options here for enabling location for how you might want to visualize this data in your map card. So we're going to go ahead and use our coordinates. And then there's this little box here for repeat identical features. So in the case of our storm events, so we've got this table of storm events in Pennsylvania, and I know a little bit about this data, but as you can imagine, with storms, you're going to have more than one type of storm in one location over time. Even though this is just 2017 data, but you may have a fire in one location and then a blizzard in that same location later on in the year. So we want to make sure that even if they occur in the same spot, they each get assigned a point. So that's what we're going to do here. We'll repeat identical features. And then we'll go ahead and it goes pretty quickly. There we go. There's our location field added. And at this point, all we need to do is drag and drop this. There's the drag and drop thing. We have some drop zones here. As I get over to the map card, we'll just add it as a new layer. There we go. Now I can see those storm events in the map card. We started out with just a CSV file that didn't have a location field. Now we can actually visualize it in our map card. So I want to point out a couple of things here. As we're looking at this map card, we have our state boundaries and we have the storm events. And what we can do is we can pop open, say, our storm events, and we get access to the layer options. So we might think, well, I don't know if I really want to just look at them as these orange locations. Maybe we want to do something with our symbology. We have a symbology tab, and currently it's just styled by the coordinates. But you'll notice the drop down, we can access those other fields that we have in that table or that data set. Maybe we want to know what the event types are, what kind of storms are happening here. So we'll switch over to event type, and notice that's a string field, and Insights knows that's categorical data. So then it's going to symbolize it based on unique symbols. So it's going to give each storm event a different color. And we can even see with our little legend tab here, switch over, and then we can see all the different event types showing up. Blizzard, debris flow, heat, flash flood, and there's quite a few here. So we can then get a color symbol for each one of those. And what's kind of fun too is that you might think, well, I wonder where these 8 blizzards are located. All I have to do is click on it. Then it selects it in that card so that I can see exactly where that's going on. I can click that again, bring everything back, and just kind of go through and, you know, maybe I want to see exactly where some of these events are occurring. So that's an option for some symbology. I'll show you one more here if you want to work with, let's see, we've got a field for property damage, and that's numeric. So when we switch to property damage, then Insights wants to show it as counts and amounts. So varying symbol sizes based on how much property damage has happened in those locations. So it gives you an idea visually, you know, what's going on. First, you can kind of see what storm events are occurring. Then you can say, well, I wonder what the property damage is, and you want to see that visually. And then you kind of dig into the data even more. You might think, well, maybe I want to investigate kind of this area, some of these areas that have maybe some more property damage. Maybe I want to find out what storms have occurred there that's caused this. It gives you more insights into your data as you explore it. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to switch this back. I'll switch back to event type, and we're going to go back to our legend, and we'll go ahead and pop this out, which is kind of fun too. So we can pop out our legend, have it show up here so that we can use it as we go through. That's just something you can do. And then I've got a couple more things to show you all here. Let's see, I think we'll kind of to illustrate some more of this kind of drag and drop idea. Let's just create a summary table really quick. So we've got this event type field, and we can see it in the map card. Well, let's just drag it. So I can click it and drag it. Notice that when I go to add it to a new card, no matter where I'm at on my page, it'll give me these drop zones. So I can put it into a map, a chart, or a table. So we're just going to do a table. Let's do a summary table. Move that over a little bit. So a summary table gives us a count of each one of these storm events. So, we may want to get an idea. Maybe we want to sort ascending or descending to find out which storm event has had the most events. Then we might also think, well, we were kind of looking at the property damage earlier, so we can add that. We'll just drag and drop that into our table, add a new field. And we can just kind of expand this out a little bit. And then we get the property damage here for each one of these event types. So then we think, well, it might be kind of interesting to see what month these occurred in. So then we can come back up to our date time field, one of those subfields we looked at earlier. And there's, for the begin date time, we'll do, let's just drag in the month, and we'll just add that in as a new field. So then we can see, take a look at some of these storm events for a particular month and see what's going on. Floods in July, and as we click even in our table, it updates in our map card. So any card that uses that same data set will update as we interact with these different charts or tables that we're working with in Insights. All right, so kind of fun. Insights is one of those that through this drag and drop process, you learn more about your data, gain more insights. I think that's probably why they named it Insights, but you just kind of learn more about your data as you go through and ask and answer questions about your data as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to turn this over to Melissa, and she's going to continue on with different charts and analysis and sharing and show you a few things there. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'll hand this over to Melissa.
All right, thank you, Brianna. Let me share my screen. And so what you should be looking at now is my Insights page. So Brianna walked us through some of the basic steps of pulling in the data, preparing the data, and then some basic visualizations. So now let's do some sort of exploratory analysis. And I've got storm events from across the US in 2020. Now, if I pull them onto a map, I've got quite a few, and I can show them by event type. And again, it's kind of a mess. You can't really determine, what's going on here, what kinds have been going on, where are they going on. So let's take a look at maybe event type, and I'll put it into a chart. And now I can see the different types of events in here. I've got like flash flood, hail, thunderstorm, and so on. So maybe I want to concentrate my analysis on flooding. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply what's called a data set filter. And I do it over here in the data set itself. And you see the little data set filter. I click on that, and I can select all, or I could just select a few of these. So I'm going to select flash flood and flood. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little map. I'm going to pull that on there. Then I'm going to pull in these storm events. And there's actually quite a few flood events. And this is a little bit murky. So we want to make it to where it's a little more easy to understand. So I'm actually going to pull in my states into another map as well. Then I'm going to pull in those storm events, but this time I'm going to spatially aggregate them. Then it gives me a pop-up that tells me, so what do you want to aggregate it on? And that's going to be the states. Which layer do you want to summarize? And it's going to be those storm events. Then I've got some other options, but I'm going to click Run. And that should come up, very shortly. So now what it's done, it's aggregated all those events by state. And what I can do is, let me just make one more map. I'm going to pull the storm events over here. I'm going to show a heat map. So this is just a visualization of density of points. This is not actually what you're looking at here, not statistically significant. We actually do have an analysis tool which can run like a kernel density on this, but this is good just for analysis, just to explore. So what I can do is I can sync my extents, and now I can zoom in and zoom out. And when I do it on one map, it's going to appear on another one. So it gives me a different view of the same data on different maps. So another thing that I might want to do is I want to look at those floods, but I want to look at them in a bar chart. So I'm going to maybe I want to look at the top 5 states that have flood events. So I'm going to pull that into a chart. And right now, of course, we've got, I think almost all, if I look at this, probably almost all 50 states have flood events. Again, this is a little messy. I want to just see which are the states that have the most flood events. So what I can do is I can do a card filter. So at the beginning, I did that data set filter where I applied the filter to the entire data set. So any card I create from this data set, it's got that filter applied. But we also have these card filters, and the card filter will apply a filter to that card only. So I can go in here and I can do it by field if I want. I can also click on advanced and I can create an expression as well. But what I want to do is I just want to see the top 5 states that have flood events. So I'm going to click apply, and there you go. Now, when I click on Virginia, it's going to also update on the map to show me. And if I go in here and zoom in, just to see a little bit better, it changes as needed. So I can create another chart, maybe showing the cause of the flood by state. So I'm going to click on state and then go down to flood cause. I'm going to select 2 of these. And I'm going to drop it into, let's try a tree map first. And this, again, this is not the greatest. And that's a good thing about Insights, is because everything I'm doing here, it's not costing me anything really. It's not taking me a ton of time. I'm not writing some sort of script that's taking me an hour. I could just experiment with this. That's really the whole point of this, is to experiment with the data, experiment with the visualizations. Some of them work, some of them don't. It just really depends. So let's go with link chart and see what that looks like. And if I expand this, this actually is pretty useful because this shows me I've got heavy rain has caused a lot of these, and you see the majority have been caused by heavy rain, but then I've got other things like tropical storm. And then I'm able to see a few little outliers, like Iowa got flooding based on some sort of tropical system. Maybe that came up from the Gulf of Mexico. So another interesting way to look at your data. So we've looked at the events, we've looked at the cause of the events, but maybe we want to get an idea of when the events happened. So I can go up to the time here, and I can pull it into a time series chart. Let me make that a little bit bigger. And I've got a time slider. I can go through to the time. I can click on certain points to see how many events occurred. And depending on the types of cards I have, it's going to change to reflect that as well. But maybe I want to further zoom into that data by selecting certain aspects of that time, like a month, and combining it with another attribute. So let me go back. I'm going to look at month, and then I'm going to go back to flood cause. And I'm going to pull that into a chart, and I'm going to make a heat chart. So let me expand that out again. And I can do a few different things here. So the way it is now is on my columns, I've got the cause, and then I've got the dates, or I've got the months on the side. Actually, maybe I want to switch around the way that that looks, so I can go down to the bottom and I can flip the fields. And that's just going to show me a different aspect of the way the data is. So far, I've been analyzing the data. I've been doing it through exploration, through different types of visualizations, just dragging and dropping different fields onto these various cards. But we can also apply certain types of analysis tools to certain workflows. So we've got something called an action button. So any of my chart cards, if I click on the bottom right, there's this action button. And based on the questions I have about my data, it's going to give me some options. So if I want to know maybe how it's related, I click on that. And it's going to give me some options here. You notice that some of the options are charts. So some of them are things that I already have available to me as visualizations. But then other things allow me or don't allow me, depending on the type of data I have, maybe to run some sort of algorithm. Again, I don't have anything in here I could calculate a density ratio, so it's not going to allow me to do that. But it does tell me if you want to do this, you can do this from a map card. And looking at the map card, if I click on that action button, I have the find answers, but I also have a spatial analysis option. And this is where I talked about where you can do, if you want to calculate the density of your points, want to calculate some sort of spatial mean. You can also apply a spatial filter. You can do drive times. You've got different options here as well. And you notice that if any of you use ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro, even ArcGIS Online, you notice there's only like 7 or 8 tools in here. Not a lot. This is not a GIS heavy app. This is meant to be used by anybody, business analyst, data scientist, someone who's new to GIS, and someone who's really familiar with GIS. This is really a way to explore the data, both through maps, so both spatially, but also through the charts. That's why we don't overwhelm you with all these too many tools. All right, so let's say that we finished the analysis. And I'm actually going to go to one I've completed earlier. So I've finished this. I've done a whole bunch of analysis on this, and I want to be able to present this information to somebody. So I can do a few different things here. You notice how the background is a different color. I've got this fancy looking card with a picture in it. I can do that through different means. So for instance, up here, I can set the page options. I can change that background color. I can change maybe the border color, text, card title, font. I can also go in here and change the base maps too. Maybe I want to change them to something different. And I can add in text and media. So that's what you see right here. In this text and media, I can add in a hyperlink, images, and actually videos too. And Brianna had mentioned the model, so I want to show you what this model looks like. It's the analysis view. And so everything I've done in this workbook, this automatically has been added to this model. So I can actually save this model. I can share it with somebody. And if they've got different data, their own data, maybe this is a workflow I do every day. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can actually do it through the model. Okay, so I've set up my page, like the way it looks. Now I want to share it. So if I go down to that page, oops, wrong page. If I go down to that page and I click on share. So that's where I decide how do I want to share this. So first I'm going to give it a title, call it flood analysis. I can give it tags to a description. So if I'm going to be sharing this to my organization or maybe to people who are in maybe ArcGIS Online, this will enable them to find it easier. There's something really interesting up here is on selected cards, I can actually enable the option to allow people to export the image they see. So that would be like this chart you see down here at the bottom, this link chart. They can export that as a JPEG. They can put it into a document. And some cards too, they can export the data if they like. They can export the data associated with that card. I'm just going to leave it as is. And then I decide who I want to share it with. I'm going to share it publicly. Then I click share. And it's going to do a few things for me. Just take just a few seconds. So when it's finished with this, it's going to give me a few different options. It's going to give me a URL to my shared page. And if I click go, this is what that shared page looks like. So let's say I've created this for some sort of, I'm going to send this to one of my coworkers. All I have to do is if I've shared this publicly, I can just give them the link, and this is what's going to happen when they open it, and they can go in here and they can interact with it too. You notice you don't see the data set on the left-hand side. We're just showing them the results, just showing them the cards. So another thing that happens when you share that page is you've got this embed here. So you can actually embed your pages into different sorts of like web pages, story maps. And let me actually show you an example. Let me move this. Here's an example of a really awesome story map. And if you're interested in this story map, this is in the gallery in that link that Brianna shared earlier. But as we go through the story map, you notice you see some charts here, these interactive charts down here. We've got some charts too. These are all insights chart cards, insights pages that have been embedded into the story map. And then you notice as you embed this, people can still interact with it, with the embedded page in there. So let's say that I did my analysis, I created this fantastic looking story map, I embedded these pages in here. But then, a month later, I realized, I've got some update to the data. What am I going to do? Am I going to have to, recall this story map and update it? No. All you need to do is you go back and you make the changes. So let's pretend like I made the changes. And then when I click on share, I just share it again. I update that sharing and it will automatically update into that story map or whatever web page that you've embedded it in. But that's really it. I know we showed you a lot of information, but hopefully you gleaned some gems from that you can use in your own analysis. I'm going to stop sharing. And Brianna, if you could show that slide with links.
Yes, let me do that. All right, here we go.
All right, so a few of you had asked some questions earlier, and so I shared some links with you. Those links will take you to the Insights documentation. So it's not just going to take you to what the question was. So the Insights documentation, also you see on the screen here, the product page. Brianna had shared some links with you earlier. I believe that one of those will take you to that as well.
Yeah, and I'll grab them quick here too.
We also offer instructor-led training. So we've got, it used to be a one-day course, now it's a two-day course. And what we showed you in this demonstration was the ArcGIS Online app. We also have a desktop app version. And in that, you can do different things like run some scripting, so you can get pretty fancy. But that's about it. Did anyone have any questions that either Brianna or I could share or answer for you? Thanks, Matt.
A couple more links here I'll put in the chat too.
All right. So did you have anything else, Brianna?
I don't think so. I think I've got all of the links down in the chat that are up on this slide too. And once again, these are great resources for insights, and we do have our instructor-led training for insights, and both Melissa and I teach that class. So maybe someday we'll see you in that class, but definitely want to mention that. But yeah,
that came up in the chat.
Oh yeah.
They were wondering if you could repeat how you attach the coordinates to non-spatial data.
Oh yes. Okay. Let me see here. Yeah, how to enable location, right? Let me,
Yes.
Okay, let me share that screen again here. Okay, I think there we go. Yes, so we had originally this Pennsylvania storm event CSV file that we brought in, and it didn't have this location field type. Let's actually do a new page here. We'll bring it in again and upload that file, grab that and add that in. So you can see it doesn't exist from our CSV file or an Excel file, but it has these latitude and longitude fields within that table. So there's actually this little data set options, these three little dots, and that's where you can find the enable location at the top of that pop out. And then it basically pops out this window here where you can let it know what the latitude and longitude fields are. And then in our case, we did repeat identical features. And if you know a specific spatial reference for your data, you can indicate it here as well. And all you have to do is run it. And it just, and really quickly, it attaches those that location field type for you. Did that help? Let's see.
That was good. We have another question in here.
Sure.
Is there an easy way to link from the tools to help pages on how they work from the Insights interface?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think we have that ability from the actual cards or tools. I don't think so. Let's see if we go into map, card. Melissa,
No,
do you know? I don't think that there
No, it's not like
is.
an ArcGIS.
Yeah,
I think I know what you're talking about.
Information icon.
All right. But if you go to the top right with that little question mark, that'll take you to help. But I know that that's not what you had asked. You wanted to know about if you could hover. But I don't know. We don't have it on Insights.
No, maybe that will be there someday, but at the moment, no.
Anybody got anything else? This was wonderful. Thank you very much. It really helped me get an idea of what's going on. That's for sure.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, it was wonderful to do this demo and this presentation for y'all.